Greetings, traveler. You've arrived at a place where time slows down, and the worries of the day begin to fade. Here, we gather to listen to history told not in haste, but in a gentle rhythm meant to calm the mind. Perhaps you're ready to drift into sleep, or perhaps you simply wish for quiet company tonight. Either way, I'm so glad you're here. Tell me, where are you listening from, and what time of day accompanies your journey back through the ages? And if you find these soft retellings of the past comforting, a simple tap on subscribe ensures you'll never miss another night's tale. Now, breathe deeply, rest easily, and let us step into the stories waiting just beyond the veil of memory. Tonight, we travel to a time before memory itself, before written words carved meaning into stone, before even the first human voice whispered questions into the darkness. We journey to the deep past, to forests that no longer exist, to creatures who move through worlds we can barely imagine. This is the story of how we came to be, how apes became something else, something more, something undeniably human. It is a story millions of years in the making, unfolding across continents that have shifted and changed, through climates that have warmed and frozen and warmed again. It is your story, and mine, and every person who has ever drawn breath beneath the stars. Close your eyes now, if you wish, and let yourself drift backward through the centuries, through the millennia, through epochs whose names sound like poetry: Pleistocene, Pliocene, Miocene. Let us go back to the beginning, or as close to the beginning as we can reach, to a time when our ancestors were not yet us, but were becoming, always becoming. The African sun hangs heavy in the sky, casting long shadows through the canopy of an ancient forest. The air is thick and warm, carrying the scent of green things growing, of flowers blooming in impossible colors, of fruit ripening on branches high above the forest floor. The sounds here are unlike anything you would hear today: calls and songs from birds that have long since vanished, the rustle of creatures moving through undergrowth, the distant crack of a branch. In this forest, somewhere between 20 and 7 million years ago, our story quietly begins. Here, in these trees, live the ancestors we share with chimpanzees and bonobos, our closest living relatives. They are not quite like the apes we know today, these distant grandparents of ours. They move through the canopy with grace, their arms strong and sure, their fingers grasping branches with practiced ease. They live in social groups, communicating through gestures and sounds, forming bonds that shape their days. A mother cradles her infant close to her chest, the baby's tiny fingers clutching her fur. A group of juveniles chase each other through the branches, their play preparing them for the challenges of adult life. An old male sits in the crook of a tree, eyes half closed in the afternoon heat, his presence a reminder of hierarchies and relationships that structure their world. These creatures do not know they are ancestors. They do not look toward a future where their descendants will walk upright, will speak in complex languages, will wonder about the stars. They simply live, as all creatures do, finding food, avoiding predators, raising their young, existing in the eternal present that is the animal experience of time. And yet, within them, within the very structure of their bodies and brains, lie the seeds of what we would become. The evolutionary journey from these tree-dwelling apes to modern humans is not a straight line, not a simple progression from primitive to advanced. It is instead a branching tree, a complex story of divergence and adaptation, of species arising and thriving and sometimes disappearing, leaving only fossilized bones and stone tools as evidence they ever existed at all. It is a story written in the patient language of geological time, where a million years is but a chapter, where change accumulates so slowly it would be invisible to any single observer, yet over the vast stretches of deep time transforms everything. Somewhere between 7 and 6 million years ago, a split occurs. It is not dramatic, not a sudden break, but rather a gradual divergence, populations separating, evolving in different directions. On one branch, the lineage that will lead to modern chimpanzees and bonobos continues. On the other, something new begins to emerge, the first tentative steps toward humanity. We call this lineage the hominines, a group that includes all species more closely related to humans than to chimpanzees. This is our family tree, and it is more diverse, more complex than most people imagine. The world these early hominines inhabited was changing. Africa, the continent that would serve as the cradle for human evolution, was undergoing dramatic shifts in climate and landscape. The forests that had covered much of the continent were beginning to fragment, breaking apart into isolated patches separated by expanding grasslands. This environmental transformation created new challenges and new opportunities. In the trees, the old ways continued to work, but on the ground, in the open spaces between forest fragments, different strategies were needed to survive. Picture one of these early hominines, perhaps from a species called Sahelanthropus chadensis, who lived around 7 million years ago in what is now Chad. We know this creature from a single, precious skull, discovered in the Jurub Desert in the year 2001, far from where most people had been searching for human origins. The skull is remarkable, a mosaic of features both ape-like and strangely human. The face is relatively flat, the canine teeth are small compared to those of apes, and most intriguingly, the position of the foramen magnum, the hole through which the spinal cord connects to the brain, suggests this creature may have walked upright, at least some of the time. Walking upright. It seems such a simple thing, such a small change, and yet it transforms everything. When an ape stands on 2 legs instead of 4, when it begins to habitually walk bipedally, the entire body must reorganize itself. The spine curves in new ways, forming the distinctive S-shape that helps balance an upright torso. The pelvis shortens and broadens, creating a stable base for walking but narrowing the birth canal in ways that will have profound consequences for human childbirth. The legs lengthen, the feet develop arches and lose the grasping ability of an ape's foot, becoming platforms for pushing off the ground. The arms, no longer needed for locomotion, become free for carrying things, for crafting tools, for gesturing and communication. But why? Why would an ape begin to walk upright? The question has occupied researchers for decades, and the answers are probably multiple, overlapping, reinforcing each other. In a more open landscape, standing upright allows you to see over tall grass, to spot predators or food sources from a distance. It reduces the amount of body surface exposed to the intense midday sun, helping regulate temperature in a warming climate. It frees the hands, allowing you to carry food back to a safe location, to carry infants without relying on them clinging to fur, to carry the first simple tools. Perhaps there was no single reason, no prime mover, but rather a constellation of advantages that made upright walking worth the costs and challenges it entailed. The evidence for these earliest hominines is fragmentary, tantalizingly incomplete. A skull here, some teeth there, a few post-cranial bones scattered across time and space. Each fossil is precious, each discovery reshaping our understanding of this distant past. From Ethiopia comes Ardipithecus ramidus, who lived about 4.4 million years ago. Known affectionately as Ardi, this hominin is preserved in extraordinary detail, allowing scientists to reconstruct not just what she looked like, but how she moved through her world. Ardi had long arms and grasping feet, suggesting she was still comfortable in the trees, but her pelvis and other features indicate she also walked upright when on the ground. She represents a transitional form, a creature at home in multiple environments, adapting to a changing world by maintaining options, by being flexible. The forests Ardi knew were rich and diverse, filled with woodland creatures, with monkeys and early antelope, with the ancestors of modern elephants and pigs. She would have eaten fruits and leaves, perhaps some insects and small animals, using her hands to pluck food from branches, to turn over logs in search of hidden protein. Her world was quieter than ours, lacking the constant background hum of human activity, but it was far from silent. The wind moved through leaves, rain fell in seasonal torrents, animals called to each other across the landscape, and Ardi moved through it all, surviving, adapting, contributing her genetic legacy to the species that would follow. As time flows onward, as millennia accumulate into millions of years, new species appear in the fossil record. The Australopithecines emerge, a diverse group of hominines that thrived in Africa between roughly 4 million and 2 million years ago. Their name means southern ape, given because the first fossils were discovered in South Africa, but they are found across eastern and southern Africa, in places that preserve their bones in ancient lake beds and caves. They are more committed to bipedalism than their predecessors, their bodies clearly adapted for walking upright, yet they retain some features suited for climbing, suggesting they still retreated to the trees for safety or to gather food. Perhaps the most famous of all Australopithecines is a single individual, a young female who died about 3.2 million years ago in what is now Ethiopia. When her skeleton was discovered in 1974, the excavation team was celebrating their extraordinary find by listening to music, and the Beatles' song, "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds," was playing. And so she became Lucy, probably the most famous fossil in the world, her bones gracing museums and textbooks, her name known to millions who have never studied paleoanthropology. Lucy was small, standing only about 3.5 feet tall, with a brain roughly the size of a chimpanzee's, but she walked upright on 2 legs, leaving behind a skeleton that told a story of transformation. Imagine Lucy in life, moving across the landscape of the Afar region in eastern Africa. The environment here is a mosaic of different habitats, river channels lined with trees, open grasslands stretching toward distant hills, volcanic mountains rising on the horizon. Lucy and her group, members of the species Australopithecus afarensis, make their way from one food source to another, following seasonal patterns of fruiting and rainfall. They walk in the early morning coolness, their shadows long across the ground, occasionally pausing to feed on ripe fruits or to dig for roots and tubers. Lucy's hands are strong and capable, able to strip bark from branches, to crack open hard-shelled nuts, to fashion the simplest of tools by selecting a suitable stone or stick. The social life of these Australopithecines was probably complex, involving relationships and hierarchies, alliances and conflicts. They would have recognized each other as individuals, remembered past interactions, anticipated future encounters. A mother teaches her infant which foods are safe to eat, demonstrates how to access difficult resources. Young adults form bonds that will last years, grooming each other, sharing food, defending each other from threats. Elders, those rare individuals who survive into their 30s or even 40s, carry knowledge accumulated over decades, remember droughts and where to find water, know the rhythms of the land. And then one day, perhaps during a drought, perhaps while trying to cross a flooding river, perhaps succumbing to illness or injury, Lucy dies. Her body is left where it falls, and by extraordinary good fortune, it is quickly buried in sediment, protected from scavengers and the elements. Over millions of years, minerals permeate her bones, turning them to stone, preserving them through unimaginable spans of time until that day in 1974 when human hands once again touch her remains, when scientists carefully excavate her bones and begin to tell her story. Lucy is not alone in the fossil record. Hundreds of other Australopithecine fossils have been discovered, revealing a remarkable diversity of species. Some, like Australopithecus africanus from South Africa, are relatively gracile, lightly built with smaller teeth. Others, like Australopithecus robustus and Australopithecus boisé, are much more heavily built, with massive jaws and enormous grinding teeth, suggesting they specialized in eating tough, fibrous plant materials. These robust Australopithecines represent a different evolutionary strategy, an adaptation to resources that other animals couldn't easily exploit. They survived for over 1 million years, a successful lineage by any measure, before eventually becoming extinct, leaving no descendants in the modern world. But alongside these Australopithecines, something new is beginning to emerge. Around 2.8 million years ago, perhaps earlier, the first members of our own genus, Homo, appear in the fossil record. The transition is not clear-cut, and there is much debate about which fossils belong to which species, about where Australopithecus ends and Homo begins. What distinguishes early Homo from the Australopithecines? The differences are subtle but significant. Early Homo species tend to have slightly larger brains, smaller teeth and jaws, and they are associated with the first clear evidence of stone tool manufacture. The oldest stone tools we have discovered date back about 3.3 million years, predating the earliest fossils assigned to Homo. These tools, found in Kenya, are simple rocks that have been deliberately struck to create sharp edges. They don't look like much, these ancient artifacts, but they represent a cognitive leap. To make even the simplest stone tool requires planning, an understanding of how rocks fracture, the ability to select appropriate materials and strike them in precise ways. It requires seeing in a rock not just what it is, but what it could become. This capacity for mental transformation, for holding in mind a desired future state and taking actions to bring it about, is fundamentally important to human cognition. By about 2.6 million years ago, stone tools become more common in the archaeological record, and we find them associated with early Homo species. These tools, part of what archaeologists call the Oldowan industry, are fairly standardized, simple cores with sharp edges, flakes struck off those cores that could be used for cutting, chopping tools for breaking bones and accessing marrow. They are not sophisticated by later standards, but they are effective, allowing early humans to process foods in new ways, to cut meat from carcasses, to crack open bones to extract the rich, calorie-dense marrow inside. The addition of meat to the diet, facilitated by stone tools, may have been crucial in human evolution. Meat is a concentrated source of calories and nutrients, particularly proteins and fats that are expensive for the body to produce but necessary for building and maintaining a large brain. By gaining access to animal foods, either through scavenging or through hunting, early humans could support the metabolic costs of larger brains. And larger brains, in turn, enabled more sophisticated tool use, more complex social behavior, more flexible problem solving. A feedback loop begins to operate, with tools and brains and diet all influencing each other, driving change that accelerates over time. One of the most important early Homo species is Homo habilis, the handyman, named for the tools found associated with their fossils. Homo habilis lived between about 2.4 and 1.4 million years ago in eastern Africa, and they show a noticeable increase in brain size compared to Australopithecines, though their brains are still small by modern standards, roughly half the size of ours. They are transitional creatures in many ways, with bodies that retain some primitive features, arms that are relatively long, fingers that curve slightly, suggesting they still climb trees, even as their increasing reliance on tools and processed foods pointed toward a different future. Picture a group of Homo habilis near the shores of an ancient lake in what is now Tanzania. The lake is teeming with life, fish swim in its waters, crocodiles bask on its shores, countless birds wade in the shallows. On the land surrounding the lake, herds of antelope graze, elephants pull down branches to reach tender leaves, hippos wallow in the mud. And here, sitting in the shade of an acacia tree, a member of Homo habilis is making a tool. He has selected a smooth, fine-grained stone from the lakeshore, and another, harder stone to use as a hammer. He examines the first stone, turning it in his hands, assessing its shape and quality. Then, with practiced movements, he strikes it precisely, and a sharp flake detaches, falling to the ground. He picks it up, tests its edge with his thumb, and satisfied, sets it aside. He continues working, creating a small collection of tools, flakes and cores that he can use in the coming days. Later, the group encounters a carcass, a zebra killed by lions who have now moved on, too full to guard their kill effectively. This is an opportunity, but it must be seized quickly before hyenas and vultures claim everything. The group approaches cautiously, watching for danger, and when they judge it safe, they set to work. Using their stone tools, they cut through tough hide that would be impossible to tear with teeth and fingernails alone. They carve off chunks of meat, working efficiently, glancing up frequently to watch for threats. Within minutes, they have taken what they can carry, and they retreat to a safer location to share the food, to feed the young and the nursing mothers, to strengthen the bonds that hold their group together. As we move forward in time, as the Pleistocene epoch begins about 2.6 million years ago, we see the emergence of new hominin species, each representing different evolutionary experiments, different solutions to the challenges of survival. Around 2 million years ago, Homo erectus appears, and this species marks a major transition in human evolution. Homo erectus is taller than earlier hominins, with a more modern body plan, long legs suited for walking and running long distances, a narrower pelvis, shorter arms. Their brains are significantly larger, approaching the lower range of modern human brain size. They make more sophisticated tools, part of the Acheulean industry, characterized by large, symmetrical hand axes that require considerable skill and planning to produce. But perhaps most remarkably, Homo erectus is the first hominin to leave Africa. By about 1.8 million years ago, we find Homo erectus fossils in Georgia, in the Caucasus region between Europe and Asia. By 1.6 million years ago, they have reached Indonesia. By 1 million years ago, they are in China. This expansion out of Africa, this colonization of new continents, required remarkable adaptability. Homo erectus encountered environments dramatically different from the African savannas where they evolved, temperate forests, seasonal climates with cold winters, unfamiliar plants and animals. They survived and thrived in these new lands through behavioral flexibility, through their ability to learn and adapt, to modify their tools and strategies to suit local conditions. The dispersal of Homo erectus across the Old World is one of the great stories in human evolution, a testament to the power of culture and technology to enable survival in diverse environments. Imagine a group of Homo erectus making their way northward from Africa, following river valleys and coastlines, moving gradually into lands where no hominin had ever been before. They are pioneers, though they don't know it, explorers of a world that must seem endlessly vast and varied. Each generation moves just a little farther, responding to population pressures, following animal migrations, searching for resources. Over thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, they spread across 2 continents, their populations diverging, adapting to local conditions, becoming the ancestors of diverse later populations. In Africa, Homo erectus continues to evolve, and by about 800,000 years ago, we begin to see fossils that are transitional, showing features that point toward later species. In Europe and Western Asia, populations of hominins give rise to the Neanderthals and their relatives. In Africa, the lineage that will lead to Homo sapiens, to us, continues to develop. The human family tree during this period is bushier than once thought, with multiple species and populations existing simultaneously, sometimes interacting, sometimes remaining separate. The control of fire represents another major milestone in human evolution, though pinpointing exactly when it happened is difficult. The earliest possible evidence for controlled fire use dates back 1.5 million years, but definitive evidence doesn't appear until about 400,000 years ago. Fire transforms human life in profound ways. It provides warmth, allowing humans to survive in colder climates and to inhabit caves that would otherwise be too cold at night. It provides light, extending the useful hours of the day beyond the setting of the sun. It provides protection, keeping dangerous animals at bay. And it provides a way to cook food, which makes many foods more digestible, releases more calories and nutrients, and detoxifies some plants that would otherwise be harmful. The hearth becomes the center of social life, a place where the group gathers in the evening, where food is shared, where stories might be told, where children learn from elders. The control of fire requires planning and knowledge. You must know how to start a fire, how to maintain it, what materials burn well. Fire must be tended, protected from rain and wind, perhaps carried carefully when the group moves. It creates new social dynamics, new forms of cooperation. Imagine the evening scene, the fire crackling and sending sparks spiraling into the darkness, faces illuminated in the warm glow, the smell of cooking meat, the sense of safety and companionship that the fire creates. It is a scene repeated countless times over hundreds of thousands of years, and it is deeply, recognizably human. Around 600,000 years ago, in Africa, the fossil record shows us hominins that are beginning to look more like modern humans. They have larger brain cases, less prominent brow ridges, more gracile skulls. This is a period of transition, of continued brain expansion, of refinement in tool technology. By 300,000 years ago, we find fossils in Morocco, at a site called Jebel Irhoud, that are clearly Homo sapiens, clearly us, though they retain some archaic features. These are among the oldest fossils of our species, and they tell us that our origins are deep, much deeper than once thought, reaching back into the Middle Pleistocene. The emergence of Homo sapiens is not a sudden event but a gradual process, a mosaic of changes occurring in different populations at different times. Populations across Africa are evolving, sometimes connected, sometimes isolated, their genes flowing together and then separating, creating a complex pattern of relationships. The Africa of this period is not a single, uniform environment but a continent of remarkable diversity, rainforests in the center, savannas in the east and south, Mediterranean climates in the north, deserts expanding and contracting with climatic shifts. Human populations adapt to these varied environments, developing different subsistence strategies, different tools, different cultural practices. By 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens fossils with fully modern anatomy appear at sites in Ethiopia and elsewhere in Africa. These people would be physically indistinguishable from us if you saw them today. They have high, rounded skulls, flat faces with small brow ridges, prominent chins. Their brains are the same size as ours, their bodies proportioned the same way. And increasingly, the archaeological record shows evidence of symbolic behavior, of distinctly modern human cognition. People are using pigments, red ochre ground into powder, for purposes we can only speculate about, perhaps for body decoration, perhaps for making markings on objects or surfaces. They are fashioning shell beads, stringing them together to create ornaments, items that serve no practical function but carry social or aesthetic meaning. The capacity for symbolic thought, the ability to let one thing stand for another thing, to create and share meanings through symbols, is fundamental to human uniqueness. Language itself is a symbolic system, using sounds or gestures to represent concepts, objects, actions, feelings. Art is symbolic, whether it's a painting on a cave wall or a carved figurine or a song. Ritual and religion are deeply symbolic, using actions and objects to express ideas about the world, about relationships, about the sacred and the transcendent. The archaeological evidence for symbolic behavior grows increasingly rich over time, providing glimpses into the inner lives of our ancestors, into their capacity for imagination and abstraction. Around 70,000 years ago, modern humans begin to leave Africa, embarking on the great migration that will eventually carry our species to every habitable continent. Some groups move northeast into the Middle East, then spread east into Asia and west into Europe. Others may follow coastal routes, moving along the shores of the Indian Ocean, eventually reaching Southeast Asia and Australia by about 65,000 years ago. Still others will wait tens of thousands of years before crossing into the Americas, probably by walking across the Bering Land Bridge when Ice Age conditions lower sea levels and expose land between Asia and North America. This expansion out of Africa is not a simple, linear movement but a complex process involving multiple waves of migration, populations moving and mixing, adapting to new environments, sometimes thriving, sometimes struggling, sometimes dying out. These migrating populations encounter other hominins already living outside Africa. Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans in Asia, possibly other archaic human populations in various regions. And they interact with these other species, sometimes peacefully, sometimes violently, and sometimes intimately. We know this because when scientists sequence DNA from modern humans and compare it to DNA extracted from Neanderthal and Denisovan fossils, they find evidence of interbreeding. Most people of non-African descent carry small amounts of Neanderthal DNA, typically 1 to 2% of their genome. People of Asian and Oceanian descent also carry Denisovan DNA. These traces of ancient interbreeding tell us that the human story is not one of separate, isolated species, but of populations that met and mingled, leaving genetic legacies that persist to this day. The Neanderthals are worth pausing to consider, these close cousins of ours who evolved in Europe and Western Asia, who adapted to Ice Age conditions, who survived for hundreds of thousands of years before finally disappearing around 40,000 years ago. For a long time, Neanderthals were portrayed as brutish and primitive, less intelligent than Homo sapiens, destined to be replaced by more advanced humans. But the evidence tells a different story. Neanderthals had large brains, comparable in size to ours. They made sophisticated tools, controlled fire, built shelters. They cared for their injured and elderly, as evidenced by fossils showing individuals who survived serious injuries that would have required help from others. They buried their dead, sometimes with grave goods, suggesting some concept of an afterlife or at least respect for the deceased. They used pigments and created ornaments. They may have had language, though this is debated. They were, in short, human in most of the ways that matter, just a different kind of human than we are. Imagine a Neanderthal family in their cave home in what is now France, during the depths of the last ice age, perhaps 50,000 years ago. Outside, the landscape is cold and harsh, snow covers the ground, and glaciers carve their way across northern Europe. But inside the cave, warmed by a carefully maintained fire, life goes on. A woman is working on a hide, scraping it clean with a stone tool, preparing it to be used as clothing or bedding. A man is knapping flint, creating a sharp point that will be hafted to a wooden shaft to make a spear for hunting. Children play near the fire, watched over by an elder whose face is marked by a long lifetime of experience. They have food stored, meat from a recent hunt, preserved in the cold. They have each other. They survive. And then, gradually, Homo sapiens populations expand into Europe, bringing new technologies, new social structures, perhaps new diseases. The two species coexist for several thousand years, occupying the same landscapes, sometimes living in close proximity. There is contact, interaction, interbreeding. And then the Neanderthals are gone, their last populations disappearing around 40,000 years ago. Why? The question has generated much debate. Was it competition with Homo sapiens, our greater numbers and technological advantages gradually pushing them to marginal habitats? Was it climate change, ice age conditions creating stresses they couldn't overcome? Was it assimilation, small Neanderthal populations gradually absorbed into larger Homo sapiens groups through interbreeding? Probably it was a combination of factors, no single cause but a confluence of pressures that ultimately proved too much. Whatever the reasons, the Neanderthals left the world stage, leaving behind only their fossils, their tools, and the genetic traces they contributed to our genome. As Homo sapiens spread across the world, we encounter an extraordinary diversity of environments, each presenting unique challenges and opportunities. The people who reached Australia 65,000 years ago had to cross significant stretches of open ocean, requiring boats and navigational skills. Once there, they found a continent of marsupial megafauna, giant kangaroos and wombats, enormous birds and lizards, animals unlike anything seen in Africa or Asia. Within a few thousand years of human arrival, many of these large animals were extinct, probably due to a combination of human hunting and landscape modification through the use of fire. The colonization of the Americas came later, probably beginning around 15 to 20,000 years ago, though the exact timing and routes remain subjects of ongoing research. At the peak of the last ice age, massive glaciers covered much of northern North America, but a corridor may have opened between the ice sheets, allowing passage from Alaska into the heart of the continent. Alternatively, people may have traveled down the Pacific coast by boat, staying near the shore, exploiting marine resources. Once south of the ice, they found vast, productive landscapes teeming with game. The peopling of the Americas happened rapidly. In archaeological terms, within a few thousand years, humans had spread from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, adapting to every environment from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforest to high mountain plateau. The capacity for cultural adaptation, for learning and transmitting knowledge across generations, for inventing new tools and strategies to suit local conditions, is what enables humans to inhabit such diverse environments. Unlike other species, which are constrained by their biological adaptations, humans can survive in places our bodies are not naturally suited for through the use of culture. We wear clothing to survive cold, build shelters to protect ourselves from heat and storms, develop specialized hunting technologies for different prey, domesticate plants and animals to create reliable food sources. Culture gives us flexibility, allows us to respond to environmental changes much faster than genetic evolution could. It is our species' superpower, the adaptation that makes all other adaptations possible. Over the last 40,000 years or so, human culture undergoes what has been called a creative explosion, though whether this represents a real change in cognitive capacity or simply an increase in population size and cultural complexity is debated. The archaeological record becomes rich with evidence of artistic expression, symbolic behavior, technological innovation. People create magnificent cave paintings, like those at Lascaux in France or Altamira in Spain, depicting animals with stunning realism, along with abstract symbols whose meanings remain mysterious. They carve figurines from ivory and stone, small sculptures of animals and humans, including the famous Venus figurines, stylized female forms with exaggerated features. They create musical instruments, flutes carved from bird bones, capable of playing melodic tunes. They develop new hunting technologies, including the otlotl, a spear thrower that increases the velocity and range of projectiles, and eventually the bow and arrow. The cave paintings in particular capture the imagination. These images created deep underground, often in places difficult to access, illuminated only by flickering torchlight. What compelled people to venture into the darkness and create these images? Were they ritual sites, places where shamans sought visions or performed ceremonies to ensure successful hunts? Were they teaching tools, ways of passing on knowledge about animals and hunting? Were they simply art for art's sake, expressions of the human impulse to create beauty, to leave a mark, to say we were here, we lived, we mattered? We may never know for certain, but standing before these paintings today, separated from their creators by thousands of years, we feel a connection across time, recognizing in them something profoundly familiar, essentially human. By about 12,000 years ago, the last ice age is ending, and the world is warming. The great glaciers retreat, forests spread into previously frozen lands, sea levels rise, flooding coastal areas and creating new shorelines. Human populations respond to these changes, adapting their subsistence strategies. In some regions, particularly in the Middle East, people begin to experiment with agriculture, deliberately planting and tending crops rather than simply gathering wild plants. They begin to domesticate animals, initially probably through managing wild herds, then through selective breeding that gradually creates animals different from their wild ancestors, sheep and goats that are more docile, cattle that produce more milk, dogs bred from wolves that work with humans rather than competing with them. The Neolithic Revolution, the transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture, is one of the most consequential changes in human history, and it is the beginning of another story, the story of civilization and everything that follows. but it builds on everything that came before, on millions of years of evolution, of adaptation, of species arising and changing and sometimes disappearing. The farmers who planted the first wheat and barley in the Fertile Crescent did so with brains shaped by the challenges faced by Lucy walking through the Ethiopian highlands, with hands shaped by generations of toolmakers, with social instincts forged in small groups living on the African savanna. The story of human evolution is sometimes told as a triumphalist narrative, a steady progression from primitive to advanced, from ape to human, as if we were the inevitable endpoint, the purpose toward which evolution was working. But evolution has no purpose, no direction, no goal. It is simply the process by which populations change over time in response to environmental pressures, genetic mutations, and random chance. The fact that we are here, that our particular lineage survived when so many others did not, is not evidence of superiority but of luck, contingency, being in the right place at the right time with the right combination of traits to make it through whatever challenges arose. We are related to all life on Earth, sharing common ancestors if we go back far enough. We share about 99% of our DNA with chimpanzees, our closest living relatives. We share large amounts of our genome with every mammal, every vertebrate, every animal. The genetic code itself is essentially universal, the same basic system used by bacteria and redwood trees and humans. We are part of the web of life, one species among millions, special in some ways, remarkable in our cognitive abilities and cultural achievements, but not separate from nature, not above it. We evolved here, on this planet, through the same processes that shape all living things. And yet, there is something extraordinary about the human story, about the journey from those early apes in the African forests to the global species we have become. In a few million years, a blink of the eye in geological terms, our lineage transformed from creatures bound to the trees to beings who walk upright, make complex tools, control fire, speak in elaborate languages, create art and music and mythology, ask questions about our origins and our place in the cosmos. We have used our large brains and our cultural transmission to become the most widespread large mammal on the planet, inhabiting every continent except Antarctica, modifying landscapes on a scale that will be visible in the geological record millions of years from now. That transformation required so many things to come together. It required the right environmental conditions, the fragmentation of forests that made bipedalism advantageous. It required the right genetic variations, mutations that by chance increased brain size or altered hand anatomy in useful ways. It required the positive feedback loops between tools and brains and diet, each reinforcing the others. It required the capacity for culture, the ability to learn from others and pass knowledge across generations. It required language, that uniquely human ability to encode knowledge in symbols and share complex ideas. It required social cooperation, groups working together, caring for each other, defending each other, sharing resources in ways that went beyond simple reciprocity. Consider the helplessness of a human infant, born more undeveloped than the young of other primates, requiring years of intensive care before becoming independent. This is a consequence of our large brains and bipedalism. A brain that will eventually be large enough for human cognition cannot fully develop inside the mother without making birth impossible through the narrowed birth canal required for upright walking. So human infants are born early, their brains completing much of their growth outside the womb. This creates an enormous burden of childcare, requiring cooperation and support from others beyond just the mother. Fathers, grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, all contribute to raising the young, creating bonds that extend across generations. This extended childhood also creates opportunities for learning, for absorbing the accumulated knowledge of the culture, for developing the complex skills that humans need to survive. A child growing up in a human group is not just learning through trial and error but is being actively taught, shown how to make tools, how to find food, how to navigate social relationships, how to understand the world through the stories and explanations passed down through generations. the role of grandmothers, particularly, may have been crucial in human evolution. Humans are unusual among primates in that females often live long past their reproductive years. Most animals die soon after they can no longer reproduce, but human women commonly live decades after menopause. Why? One theory, called the grandmother hypothesis, suggests that post-reproductive women contribute to their grandchildren's survival, freeing their daughters to have more children sooner, improving the overall reproductive success of their lineage. A grandmother can gather food, tend children, pass on knowledge, all while her daughter focuses on nursing an infant or carrying a pregnancy. This intergenerational care creates a web of relationships and dependencies that strengthens the group. Think of a group gathered around a fire as the sun sets over the savannah, perhaps 40,000 years ago. The day's hunt has been successful, and meat is being shared, roasted over the flames, distributed according to complex social rules about who deserves what portion. Children sit close to the fire, eyes wide, listening as an elder tells a story about the hunt, about tracking the animal, about the moment of the kill, but weaving into the narrative lessons about the land, about animal behavior, about courage and cooperation. The story is entertainment but also education, passing on knowledge that might mean the difference between life and death. A young person learns not just from their own experience but from the accumulated experience of everyone who came before, encoded in stories and teachings and demonstrations. Language makes all of this possible. The evolution of language is one of the greatest mysteries in human evolution, because language leaves no fossils. We cannot know when our ancestors first began to speak, what their early languages sounded like, how simple communication gradually became complex syntax. We can make educated guesses based on anatomy, the descended larynx that creates the vocal tract necessary for producing the full range of human speech sounds, the precise neural control of breathing and vocalization, the brain regions associated with language production and comprehension. These anatomical features are present in modern humans and were probably present in our immediate ancestors, but exactly when they evolved remains uncertain. What is certain is that language, once it emerged, transformed everything. Language allows us to share information about things that are not immediately present, to talk about the past and plan for the future, to describe distant places or hypothetical situations. It allows us to coordinate complex activities, to make agreements and establish social norms, to teach efficiently by explaining rather than just demonstrating. It allows abstract thought, the ability to discuss concepts like justice or love or the divine. It creates communities bound not just by kinship but by shared stories, shared myths, shared understandings of how the world works and what it all means. Different human populations, as they spread across the world, developed different languages, thousands of them, each reflecting the environment and experience of the people who spoke it. Some languages have dozens of words for different types of snow, reflecting Arctic conditions where such distinctions matter. Some have elaborate kinship terminology, reflecting complex social structures. Some incorporate sounds not found in other languages, clicks and tones and distinctions that shape how speakers perceive and categorize the world. This linguistic diversity is one aspect of the broader cultural diversity that characterizes our species, the multitude of ways humans have found to live, to organize societies, to understand existence. Yet beneath this diversity is a unity. All human languages share fundamental features, deep structural similarities that suggest they all arise from the same cognitive capacity, the same language instinct. All human cultures, despite their differences, share certain universal traits. They all have kinship systems, though the details vary. They all have some form of art and music. They all tell stories. They all have concepts of right and wrong, though what is considered right or wrong may differ. They all care for their children. They all mark important life transitions with rituals. They all wonder about death and what, if anything, comes after. These universals point to our common humanity, the shared heritage of being one species with one evolutionary history. The genetic evidence supports this unity. When scientists compare DNA from people all over the world, they find that all living humans are remarkably similar genetically. The genetic differences between any two humans, regardless of how distant their ancestors' origins, are tiny compared to the genetic diversity seen in other species like chimpanzees. This suggests that all living humans descended from a relatively small population, that we all share relatively recent common ancestors. The genetic data points to Africa as the origin of our species, with human populations outside Africa representing descendants of people who left Africa relatively recently in evolutionary terms. The deepest genetic lineages, the oldest branches of the human family tree, are all found in Africa, consistent with our species having a long history there before some populations dispersed to other continents. This genetic evidence also tells us something humbling and important. The concept of race, as it has been understood and used to justify terrible things throughout history, has no biological validity. The visible differences between human populations, skin color, hair texture, facial features, are superficial adaptations to different climates and UV exposure, involving a tiny number of genes out of the 20,000 or so in the human genome. These differences arose recently, mostly within the last 100,000 years, and they do not correspond to any meaningful biological divisions within our species. A person whose ancestors came from Northern Europe may have lighter skin and blonde hair due to adaptations to low UV environments, while a person whose ancestors came from Equatorial Africa may have darker skin and tightly coiled hair due to adaptations to high UV and high heat, but genetically, in all the ways that matter for cognition and behavior and health and humanity, they are essentially identical. We are one species, one family, all of us carrying the legacy of those early hominins who first walked upright in the African sun. As we approach the end of our journey through deep time, as we come closer to the present, the pace of change accelerates. The development of agriculture around 12,000 years ago sets in motion a cascade of transformations. Farming allows larger, more sedentary populations, which leads to villages and eventually cities. It creates food surpluses, which allows specialization. Not everyone needs to be involved in food production, freeing some people to become craftspeople, priests, soldiers, scribes. It creates wealth disparities and social hierarchies, as some individuals accumulate more resources than others. It leads to the development of writing, initially for keeping track of economic transactions but eventually used to record laws, histories, religious texts, poetry, all of human thought and feeling. The rise of civilizations, with their cities and temples and palaces, their art and literature and monumental architecture, represents another phase of the human story, but it builds on the foundation laid over millions of years of evolution. The scribes in ancient Sumer writing on clay tablets were using brains shaped by natural selection to solve problems of survival on the African savanna. The architects who designed the pyramids of Egypt were applying cognitive abilities that evolved for tracking animals and making tools to creating structures that defy time itself. The philosophers of ancient Greece pondering the nature of reality were using language, that most human of abilities, to explore questions that may have no answers but which we cannot help asking. And here we are, the latest chapter in a story that stretches back millions of years, sitting wherever you are sitting right now, in your home or perhaps traveling, listening to these words in the darkness or the daylight, connected through technology that would seem like magic to our ancestors but which is simply the latest expression of the human capacity for innovation and creativity. You are the inheritor of an unbroken line of descent reaching back to the very origins of life on Earth. Every one of your ancestors, going back through time, survived long enough to reproduce. They survived droughts and floods, predators and diseases, ice ages and climate shifts. They found food and mates and raised children who carried their genes forward into the next generation. This is true for every living thing, but knowing it, understanding it, contemplating what it means, that is uniquely human. The evolutionary journey that produced us was neither easy nor inevitable. So many things could have gone differently. If that asteroid hadn't struck the Earth 66 million years ago, wiping out the dinosaurs and creating ecological opportunities for mammals to diversify, our primate ancestors might never have evolved. If the African climate hadn't shifted, fragmenting the forests, our ancestors might have remained tree-dwelling apes. If the right mutations hadn't occurred at the right times, if populations had become extinct before leaving descendants, if any of 1,000 contingent events had unfolded differently, we would not be here. The evolutionary tree that produced Homo sapiens is surrounded by the stumps of extinct branches, species that thrived for a time and then disappeared, leaving no descendants in the modern world. Consider the Neanderthals again, our cousins who survived for 300,000 years, far longer than Homo sapiens has existed so far, and yet they are gone. Consider Homo erectus, who spread across the Old World, adapting to diverse environments, lasting nearly 2 million years before finally going extinct. Consider all the Australopithecine species, each representing millions of years of evolution, all ultimately unsuccessful in the sense of leaving no living descendants. We are not here because we are superior to these extinct species, more advanced, more fit in some absolute sense. We are here because of a particular combination of circumstances, genetic and environmental and just plain random chance, that allowed our particular lineage to persist. This perspective should, perhaps, instill in us a measure of humility. We are not the pinnacle of evolution, not its goal or purpose. We are simply the current form taken by one branch of the tree of life, a branch that has been remarkably successful in recent millennia but which faces no guarantee of continued existence. Species go extinct. It is not a question of if but when. The vast majority of species that have ever lived are now extinct. Extinction is the norm, continuation the exception. Whether Homo sapiens will join the ranks of extinct hominins, or whether we will persist and continue to evolve, is an open question, the answer to which depends on the choices we make and the challenges we face. In recent centuries, the pace of human cultural change has accelerated to dizzying speeds. The scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, the information age, each represents transformations in how we live that would have been incomprehensible to people living just a few generations earlier. We have developed technologies that extend our senses and abilities in ways our ancestors could never have imagined. We communicate instantaneously across vast distances. We fly through the air and travel beneath the seas. We peer into the depths of space and into the inner workings of atoms. We manipulate genes and clone organisms. We have become, in some sense, the authors of our own evolution, able to change ourselves through technology in ways that bypass the slow processes of natural selection. And yet, beneath all this change, we remain recognizably human. We still form bonds of love and friendship. We still care for our children and respect our elders, at least when we are at our best. We still tell stories and create art. We still seek meaning and purpose. We still feel fear and joy, anger and compassion. We still look up at the stars and wonder. The hardware may have been upgraded, the cultural software vastly expanded, but the basic operating system remains the same, shaped by millions of years of evolution, by the challenges and opportunities faced by our ancestors. Understanding our evolutionary history can change how we see ourselves and our place in the world. It reveals that we are part of nature, not separate from it, products of the same processes that shape all life. It shows us that the divisions we create between groups of humans, the categories of us and them that have caused so much suffering, are recent and superficial, that all humans are profoundly related, all part of one extended family. It suggests that many of our behaviors and inclinations, both our noblest and our most troubling, have deep roots in our evolutionary past, shaped by selection pressures that no longer apply but which still influence how we think and feel. We evolved in small groups, probably no more than a few dozen to a few hundred individuals, where everyone knew everyone else, where reputation mattered, where cooperation was essential for survival. Our psychology reflects this evolutionary environment. We are deeply social creatures, needing connection and community. We are sensitive to fairness and reciprocity, becoming upset when we perceive that someone is not contributing their share or is taking more than they deserve. We form coalitions and alliances, we gossip to enforce social norms, we feel empathy and compassion for those we identify as part of our group. These traits served us well in the small-scale societies in which we evolved, but they can create problems in the modern world, where we live in vast anonymous cities, where we must cooperate with millions of strangers, where the consequences of our actions can affect people on the other side of the planet whom we will never meet. We also carry evolutionary baggage that can lead us astray. We evolved to crave foods high in fat and sugar, which were rare and valuable in the ancestral environment but are now abundant and contributing to epidemics of obesity and diabetes. We evolved to respond to immediate, visible threats but struggle to address slow-moving, abstract dangers like climate change. We evolved to be tribal, to trust and cooperate with members of our in-group while being suspicious of outsiders, a tendency that can fuel prejudice and conflict in a globalized world. Understanding these evolutionary roots does not excuse harmful behaviors, but it can help us understand why we are inclined towards certain patterns and how we might work to counteract problematic tendencies. The story of human evolution is also a story about change, about adaptation, about the capacity to respond to new challenges. Our ancestors faced environmental changes, predators, diseases, resource scarcity, and they survived through flexibility and innovation. We face our own challenges today: environmental degradation, climate change, pandemics, social and political conflicts, and we will need all the flexibility and innovation we can muster to address them. But we have advantages our ancestors lacked. We have accumulated knowledge spanning millennia, encoded in writing and now in digital forms, accessible to billions. We have scientific methods for understanding the world and testing ideas. We have technologies that allow cooperation and coordination on unprecedented scales. We have, if we choose to use it, the capacity to consciously shape our future in ways that promote well-being and sustainability. Yet we must also remember that we are still, in fundamental ways, the same creatures who hunted and gathered on the African savanna. Our brains have not changed significantly in the last 50,000 years or more. The same cognitive architecture that allowed our ancestors to track animals and make tools is what we now use to write computer code and compose symphonies. The same social instincts that bound small groups together must somehow be extended to create global cooperation. We are, in a sense, Stone Age minds in a Space Age world, and navigating that mismatch is one of the great challenges of our time. As you lie there, perhaps feeling sleep beginning to creep over you, consider the chain of being that connects you to the past. Somewhere in Africa, millions of years ago, an ape stood upright and took a step. That step was the first of countless steps that would lead to you. Somewhere, a hominin picked up a stone and struck it to create a sharp edge, the first of countless innovations that would eventually lead to the technology you are using right now to listen to these words. Somewhere, a mother cared for a child, teaching them what she knew, and that child survived to have children of their own, generation after generation, an unbroken chain of care and survival that leads directly to you. You are made of stardust, atoms forged in the hearts of stars that exploded billions of years ago, scattered across space, eventually coalescing into the planet we call home. You are made of molecules that have been recycled through countless organisms over billions of years of life on Earth. You are made of genes inherited from your parents, who inherited them from their parents, tracing back through time to the very origins of life. You are a continuation, a current expression of patterns of information and organization that have been persisting and evolving for nearly 4 billion years. And yet you are also unique, a never-to-be-repeated combination of genes and experiences, thoughts and feelings, memories and dreams. No one exactly like you has ever existed before, and no one exactly like you will ever exist again. You are at once utterly ordinary, one member of a species of 8 billion, and utterly unique, irreplaceable, precious. Both things are true simultaneously, and holding both truths together is part of what it means to be human. The evolutionary journey that produced us is not over. Evolution continues, though the timescales are so long we don't typically notice it happening. Human populations are still adapting to local environments in subtle ways. More significantly, human culture continues to evolve at rapid rates, creating new environments that may shape our biological evolution in the future. The foods we eat, the medicines we take, the technologies we use, all of these change the selective pressures acting on our species. Where we will be in 1,000 years, in 10,000 years, in 1,000,000 years, no one can say. We may continue to evolve as a single species, or we may diverge into separate species if populations become reproductively isolated. We may merge with our technologies in ways that blur the line between biological and artificial. We may spread beyond Earth to other worlds. Or we may, like so many species before us, become extinct, leaving behind only fossils and artifacts for some future intelligence to puzzle over. Whatever the future holds, we are here now, the product of an incredible journey, beneficiaries of millions of years of survival and adaptation. We carry within us the legacy of that journey, in our bodies, in our genes, in our brains, in our behaviors. Understanding that legacy, understanding where we come from, can help us appreciate how remarkable it is that we exist at all, how unlikely and precious and contingent life is. It can foster a sense of connection, not just to other humans but to all life, recognizing that we are all related, all part of the same grand story. It can inspire humility, recognizing that we are not the center of the universe, not the purpose of creation, but simply one species among millions, fortunate to be here for this brief moment in cosmic time. The night deepens, and perhaps your eyes are closed now, your breathing slower and deeper, consciousness beginning to blur into dreams. Let yourself drift, secure in the knowledge that you are part of something vast and ancient, connected to a story that stretches back to the very beginnings of life on Earth. You are a child of Africa, descended from apes who walked upright, from people who made tools and controlled fire and painted caves and wondered about the stars. You are a human being, Homo Sapiens, the knowing man, the wise one, cursed and blessed with consciousness, with the ability to reflect on your own existence, to ask questions about meaning and purpose, to create beauty and understand truth. Sleep now, if sleep will come, and know that you are exactly where you belong, exactly when you belong, a moment in the flow of time, a note in a symphony that has been playing for billions of years and will continue long after you are gone. Your ancestors survived against impossible odds so that you could be here. Honor them by living fully, by being curious, by caring for others, by adding your verse to the great poem of existence. You are the universe experiencing itself, atoms organized in such a way as to be aware of atoms, life contemplating life, time considering time. Rest easy tonight, traveler, knowing that you are home. Not just in whatever physical space surrounds you, but home in a deeper sense, home in the world that shaped you, home in the long story of life on Earth. You belong here. You are supposed to be here. Your existence is not an accident but the result of countless small triumphs, countless near misses survived, countless moments when things could have gone wrong but didn't. You are, in the most literal sense, a miracle, not a supernatural one, but a natural one, which is somehow even more wondrous. The story of human evolution is your story. Those early hominines taking their first bipedal steps, they were walking toward you. Those toolmakers carefully striking stone to create sharp edges, they were building toward you. Those artists painting on cave walls by flickering torchlight, they were creating for you, leaving messages across the millennia that we are here, we were here, we lived and loved and wondered. And now you are here, the latest chapter, and someday you too will be an ancestor, your choices and actions rippling forward into the future, affecting generations yet unborn. What will your contribution be? How will you live, knowing what you now know about the deep history that produced you? How will you treat other humans, knowing that all of us are family, all descended from the same small population that survived against the odds? How will you treat the planet, knowing that it is not just our home but the home of millions of other species, all related to us, all part of the same web of life? How will you face the challenges of your time with the wisdom inherited from ancestors who faced their own challenges and prevailed? These are questions for tomorrow, questions for the waking world. For now, let them drift away like clouds across an evening sky. Let yourself sink deeper into rest, into the quiet space where thoughts dissolve and consciousness softens. Let the story wash over you like gentle waves, the words blending into a soothing rhythm, a lullaby of deep time and distant places. Imagine yourself back in that African forest where our story began, but you are not there as an observer. You are there as a participant, connected to every creature that moved through those trees, to every leaf and stone and ray of sunlight filtering through the canopy. You are there in the grass where Lucy walked, in the caves where Homo erectus sheltered from the rain, around the fires where Neanderthals told their stories, in the boats that carried the first people across open ocean to unknown shores. You are there in all of it, because all of it is part of you, encoded in your genes, reflected in your body and brain. Feel the weight of that inheritance, but feel also the lightness of it. You did not ask to be born into this particular moment of the human story, but here you are, gifted with consciousness and the ability to appreciate the journey. You stand on the shoulders of countless ancestors, and you will be the foundation on which future generations stand. You are a bridge between past and future, a temporary vessel carrying forward the patterns of information that define life. And patterns are all we are, really, patterns of atoms arranged in particular ways, patterns of genes expressing themselves, patterns of neural activity creating thoughts and feelings, patterns of behavior shaped by evolution and culture and individual experience. These patterns persist, change, adapt, evolve. They flow through time like a river, never exactly the same from one moment to the next, yet maintaining continuity, identity. You are a pattern that knows it is a pattern, that can reflect on its own existence, that can wonder about where it came from and where it is going. The atoms in your body were not always yours. They have been part of other organisms, have cycled through the environment countless times. The carbon in your bones was once in the atmosphere, absorbed by plants, eaten by animals, returned to the air when those organisms died and decomposed. The water in your cells has passed through dinosaurs and ancient seas, has fallen as rain on landscapes that no longer exist. You are a temporary arrangement of borrowed materials, and someday those materials will be returned, recycled, incorporated into new forms. The atoms are immortal, but the pattern that is you is brief, a flicker in the darkness, here and then gone. But what a beautiful flicker. What a gift to exist at all, to experience consciousness even briefly, to love and learn and wonder. What an extraordinary thing to be alive in a universe that is mostly empty space and dead matter, to be one of the rare configurations of atoms that can think and feel. What luck to be here now, in this time when we can know our history, can trace our lineage back through the ages, can understand the mechanisms that produced us. Our ancestors lived and died without knowing where they came from, without understanding their place in the larger story. We are the first generations to see the full picture, to know the deep history, and that knowledge is a gift. Let that gift comfort you as you drift towards sleep. You are known. Your story has been read in bones and stones, in genes and geological strata. You are part of something larger than yourself, connected to all that came before and all that will come after. You are home in the cosmos, made of star stuff, shaped by evolution, gifted with consciousness for this brief moment. You are exactly what billions of years of cosmic and biological evolution produced, and that is enough. You are enough. The darkness grows deeper, or perhaps it's not darkness at all but simply rest, the quiet space between thoughts, the peaceful emptiness that allows renewal. Let yourself sink into it, trusting in the processes that have sustained life for billions of years, trusting in your body's wisdom, inherited from ancestors who survived long enough to pass their genes to you. Your heart beats without your conscious direction, following rhythms established millions of years ago when the first hearts began to pump. Your lungs breathe, your cells metabolize, your neurons fire, all following ancient patterns, ancient wisdoms encoded in your very being. You are safe here, in this moment, held by the same forces that have held life since its beginning. The Earth turns beneath you, spinning through space as it has for billions of years, circling a star that will shine for billions more. The atoms in your body are held together by forces as old as the universe itself. You are part of all of it, inseparable from it, made of it. There is nowhere else you could be, nothing else you could be, than exactly what and where you are right now. And so we come to the end of our journey through time, having traveled from those first upright steps to this present moment, having traced the long road from ape to human, from forest to global civilization, from unconscious survival to conscious reflection. It is a story without a true beginning or end, because the evolutionary process continues, life flows onward, and we are simply one moment in that flow. But for tonight, for now, the story pauses. The words slow and then stop. The voice that has been your companion through this journey fades into silence. Take with you into your dreams, or into the quiet of your night, a sense of wonder at the improbability and beauty of existence. Take with you the knowledge that you are part of a story vaster and older than you can fully comprehend, but that you matter nonetheless, that your life has meaning simply by virtue of being part of the great continuity of life on Earth. Take with you compassion for yourself and others, knowing that we are all fellow travelers on this journey, all trying to make sense of our brief moment of consciousness. Thank you for traveling this path with me tonight, for giving your attention to this story of origins and becoming. May you rest well, may your dreams be peaceful, and may you wake tomorrow with renewed appreciation for the extraordinary fact of your existence. You are a human being, Homo Sapiens, the latest expression of an evolutionary lineage millions of years old, and you are magnificent simply for being here at all. The story goes quiet now. The voice fades. The night holds you gently. And somewhere, in the silence that follows, life continues its ancient dance, patterns forming and reforming, evolution working its slow magic, creating tomorrow's stories from today's experiences. You are part of that dance, that magic, that story. Sleep now, traveler. Rest well. You have journeyed far through time tonight, and you have earned your peace. The past is behind you, the future ahead, but this moment, this now, is yours alone. Breathe it in. Let it be enough. Let yourself be enough. Close your eyes and drift away, secure in the knowledge that you are exactly where you belong, exactly what you are meant to be, a human being, conscious and alive, part of the great unfolding story of life on Earth. And as the last words fade into silence, as consciousness releases its hold and sleep finally claims you, remember this, you are home. You have always been home. The journey that brought you here, that produced you, that made you possible, it is the same journey that has brought forth all life, all beauty, all meaning. You are not separate from that journey but an integral part of it. You are the universe looking at itself, life knowing itself, time experiencing itself. Rest now in that knowledge. Rest in the peace of belonging. Rest in the deep time that holds us all, that connects us all, that makes us all one family, one story, one extraordinary experiment in consciousness and creativity and care. The words end, but the story continues, and you are part of it, always have been, always will be, woven into the fabric of existence itself. Good night, traveler. Safe journeys through the landscapes of dream. And when you wake, remember what you learned tonight about where you came from, about what you are, about the miracle of your existence. Carry that knowledge gently, like a candle in the darkness, illuminating your path forward. The story of human evolution, the untold story, has been told once more, passed from the deep past into the present, from voice to ear, from mind to mind, as humans have shared stories for hundreds of thousands of years. And now it is yours, part of your understanding, part of how you see yourself and the world. Use it well. Share it if you wish. Let it change you, even if only slightly, in ways that honor the long journey that brought you here. And with that, with gratitude for your presence and your attention, the tale comes to its close. Not an ending, really, but a resting place, a gentle pause in the ongoing story. May it serve you well. May it bring you peace. May it help you sleep, and may you wake renewed, ready to add your own verse to the great poem of human existence. Farewell for now, traveler, and thank you for sharing this night, this journey, this quiet exploration of who we are and how we came to be. Until we meet again in some future tale, some other journey through history's gentle landscapes, rest well and dream deeply. You have been a perfect companion on this voyage through time. The voice stops. The story ends. The night embraces you. And in the silence that follows, in the soft darkness of rest, the ancient patterns continue their work, the dance of life continues, and you, precious human, continue with it, breathing, being, belonging to the vast and beautiful story of existence itself. Sleep well.